Excuse me, Sarah.
Thanks, Karen, and hello, everybody. My story is the backstory to a poem that I know some of you know called The Adams River Salmon Run. So this is what happened before the poem. And for a while in my environmental work, I was what I called at the time a weed warrior. I was someone who promoted the perils of invasive plants. And soon, invasive plants became the only thing I noticed when I was hiking, when I was driving along the highway, going shopping, looking around in the parking lot. And as part of that project, I took my Weed Warrior materials to the Shuswap's Salute to the Salmon, which is a 3-week celebration of salmon. And it takes place at a park on the Adams River. The year that I was there was one of the biggest salmon runs that had been recorded for decades. The Adams River is perfect salmon spawning habitat. It's cold and clear, and it's fast flowing with extensive gravel bars as the river flows into Shuswap Lake. And this year, 8 million salmon were expected, a huge number. They will have swum upstream for over 1,000 kilometers from the estuary of the silty Fraser River. They fling themselves up the rapids of Hell's Gate Canyon. Then they fork up the much clearer Thompson River through Shuswap Lake, and eventually they arrive at the Adams. By the time they reach the river, their bodies are breaking down from the transition from saltwater back to freshwater. They arrive, they spawn, and then they die. This year, the community organizers had set up a huge tent for educational displays, and that's where I laid out my materials. It was October, and the mornings were frosty, and the display tent was really quite chilly and damp. So in the mornings before it opened, I would walk along the river in the cool quiet, through the golden birches, the cottonwoods, and the sky seemed always to be azure blue. I wandered the trails and watched the salmon, watched them splashing as they thrashed in the water, their fins slicing the surface, and the channel was red with their bodies. Their bodies had turned red from moving upstream as they came from the ocean. The river smelled of ammonia from the decomposing salmon, and their carcasses were piled on either sides of the river, and I would even find them in stream or in the forest along where bears and gulls had perhaps dropped them. I felt the immensity of death and the cycle of life. By afternoons, when the air warmed, people thronged into the tent. Food kiosks were popular, especially the salmon bannock made by local First Nations. A fisheries scientist worked at a table outside dissecting a fish that she or he might have found dead along the riverbank. And during the dissection, they would talk about the secrets hidden within the salmon, its health, whether it had spawned successfully, how all of its parts were a system. And I was fascinated. The trails along the river were jammed, the viewing platforms were jammed. Wherever there was a chance of seeing fish, people were there. Elders with canes or pushing walkers, women in high heels, children running everywhere, bikers in their leathers. I was astounded that so many had come to witness an event of nature. I felt connected to them. We had all been drawn by the mystery of the cycle of life and death, by the intensity of something larger than ourselves. After the despair of years of negative environmental work and all of that focusing on invasive plants, I was overcome by this collective human energy, all perhaps with a need to experience a wonder of nature. I was moved by the salmon and the cycle of their lives. And even more, I was moved by the numbers of people who had come for them. I felt hope and I felt awe. Thank you.